Hi, this is Wes Fryer. Today is Thursday, the 19th of June, 2025. Juneteenth, and I am here in Seven Devils, North Carolina, and I want to share a post that I wrote today on my blog called Hijacked Minds and Broken Trust, and I'm going to read this. So I'll include the text of this in these posts and then also the link to the original if you prefer, and that way you can get to the hyperlinks that I'm going to reference. Hijacked Minds and Broken Trust. In this wide-ranging podcast conversation, Scott Galloway discusses numerous issues of interest with Sam Harris, including how important it is that we rebuild trust in institutions across our society and culture, and the toxic power of Twitter X in hijacking our minds for the worst. And I have the link to this podcast on podcasts. This is not one of my favorite podcasts, one of my top recommendations, but as I'm going to discuss in this post, I found this a provocative and helpful post. And so this is in the podcast by Scott Galloway called the Prof G Pod, the Prof G Pod with Scott Galloway, and it's called The Collapse of American Trust with Sam Harris. Sam articulates his strong distaste for the harmful and unethical behavior of our president in 2025 and his administration, but he also shares his view that DEI and wellness in U.S. culture were out of control and are appropriately being purged in many ways. He shares a view that our society today is largely colorblind, and while there are still disparities economically across the nation, especially in positions of power and authority, race is basically something that doesn't matter anymore, and we should stop talking about it. I do not agree with those views. But I do think the focus on disinformation, misinformation, and the ways that information is shared and consumed is absolutely on point, which they discuss in the podcast. I remember in the early days of ed camps how, as organizers, we would typically make sure there was at least one session to help people who were not familiar with Twitter get on the platform and set up an account. I have a sense that we need to find ways to do the same thing today with the Fediverse, with platforms like Mastodon and Blue Sky. Although Blue Sky was spun out of Twitter, it does not currently have advertising, and it offers federation as an option for users. I facilitated a webinar at the start of this month, June 2025, for the Media Education Lab titled Beyond the Algorithmic Feed, discussing the Fediverse, and I was actually surprised by how many of the participants were not familiar with it. I think most users of social media today would agree that the shape of the tech bro-dominated social media landscape, think Twitter X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc., has and continues to have a massive influence on how we as people see and consume ideas and how we perceive the world. In addition to having a slow hunch that we need to help others in our particular spheres of influence connect with more deliberate intention to others who share our values, I also think we need to invest in influencers and empower influencers who share our values. A recent example that comes to mind is the No Kings rally in Charlotte and the thousands of other No Kings rallies like it around our country. I was not only able to participate in the rally and subsequent march through the streets of uptown Charlotte, but also share a few thoughts with the crowd, which was both an honor and a challenge I welcomed. And I have a link to that on YouTube. In fact, if you just want to Google YouTube, No Kings Charlotte Rally Wes Fryer, that should come up for you in YouTube. There is so much about our world and culture that I do not understand, but there are some things I am quite positive about. One of these is the importance of building community, both personally and locally within our neighborhoods, towns, and cities. Another thing I am sure about is the importance of finding and sharing trusted voices. And here I have a link to the Trusted Voices page on the website for Resist and Heal, which I've set up at resistandheal.com. And you can go to that and then click that link if you want. As Sam mentions at the start of this podcast conversation, we are struggling as a society, in part, because we have discounted the importance and value of expert voices and expertise. So many people have opinions, and in some circles, on some platforms, those voices can have an outsized volume and an unwarranted level of amplification, especially if we think about expertise or the need to have constructive dialogue. Another part of this podcast conversation I appreciated was Sam's description of the radicalization and bad actor transformation of Elon Musk. In some of my middle school classes, I asked students last year to identify their role models, and in some cases create media representations of those role models. Those could be slideshows or web pages. They were all so insightful. In years past, I have actually had students identify Andrew Tate as a role model, which led to an opportunity to have a conversation with that child's parent. I had numerous boys this past year identify Elon Musk as one of their role models and heroes. I want to continue asking students about role models and heroes they have for their lives, but I've also had a thought about inviting parents to share people they consider heroes and role models, including those they would like their own children to learn more about. I've been thinking of an assignment in which students identify 2 of their own heroes or role models who could actually be social media influencers, and then select 2 of the heroes or role models identified by their parents. This would provide an opportunity for dialogue, potentially in families, and also invite parents to both inform and shape, even in a small way, the educational work of their child at school. I recommend this podcast conversation with Scott Galloway and Sam Harris, not because I agree with everything they said and shared, but because it served as a good catalyst for me, reflecting on the changes we are experiencing within our society and culture, and thinking about the actions that I could take personally and professionally in the weeks and months to come. Who are your trusted voices? How do you obtain and read news about our world? How can we work together to co-create better social media and networking platforms that are less toxic and more constructive for our personal mental health, as well as our constructive evolution as local, regional, national, and global communities? For this latter goal, I recommend the following 2 podcasts: Reimagining the Internet by Ethan Zuckerman and the Initiative for Digital Public Infrastructure at UMass Amherst, and .social by Mike McHugh and the team at Flipboard. I still like the slogan, "Let's invent the future." Sharing good ideas via social media as well as face-to-face conversations is an important part of this aspirational work. And that was the end of my blog post for today on June 19th, 2025. My name is Wes Fryer. You can find me at wesfryer.com, where I share a lot of different places. I hope you have a great day. Take care.